is Arabella and I am an artist. I'm a portrait painter and a war artist, an installation artist, a humanitarian artist. I've always been fascinated in what war can teach us about the human condition, both the very good and the very bad. It's a distillation of what it means to be human. I did my A-level and O-level projects at school on war, my art projects on the First and Second World War, because I think they expose the brutality of what human beings are capable of, but also the more beautiful aspects of humanity: courage, love, self-sacrifice. And as a painter, I try and be a mirror of our times, and I think there is really nowhere that is more profoundly a mirror of our time than in the theatre of war today. I was first invited to be a war artist, an officially accredited war artist, in Iraq in 2006. So my first experience was in Iraq, and nothing prepares you for the extraordinary thing that the theatre of war is. The machinery, the weaponry, the level of sophistication. It was pretty terrifying at times. We were in Basra Palace and we were heavily mortared every single day, and hitting the deck and not knowing where these bombs would land. That was a big eye-opener to me, but my interest always came back to actually the human reaction, the soldiers, their camaraderie, their courage. And so what I tried to do was actually paint these young men exchanging thoughts, perhaps of home and loved ones, for the task ahead. Their downtime, the silence, the spaces in between, I guess, what is then reported in the newspapers. I wanted to get behind the headlines. They'd queue up and say, "Can you paint me next? Can you do a quick sketch of me next month before we get on patrol?" And it was unsaid why they were so desperate for that sketch. It became very meaningful. Well, I think in this digital age we are assaulted with a 24/7 newsreel of atrocities, of war, of horror today, obviously of the COVID-19. It's very hard to get away from that, and I think it's a human reaction to almost turn away. I've seen too much, I've read too much. I think we see it in war, we've seen it enormously in the refugee situation. From Iraq in 2006, I then spent on and off 5 years working and travelling to Afghanistan. It was really when I saw a lot of Iraqis and Afghans coming through Lesbos as refugees with the Syrians. I felt a culpability on a national level as a British subject, because we had been fighting in these countries from which these people were fleeing. And I felt a humanitarian compulsion to go and try, through my art, to, in some way, I didn't know how, help if I could. Nothing prepared me for what I witnessed unfolding on the beaches of Lesbos. It was anarchy, it was heartbreaking. Men openly weeping for all they'd lost, praying, thanking Allah for their safe arrival across the treacherous Aegean Sea that has taken the lives of thousands. It was a really devastating scene, and those weeks that I worked there, pulling children out of the water, hearing their accounts. So many were so educated, wonderful Syrians with 4 doctorates, such like. I resolved I had to do something quicker and faster than the painting. Painting is a slow thing. It happens in slow time, and it takes time for the viewer to absorb it. I thought this needed to be a bit more visceral and a bit more powerful. So I resolved to actually salvage a boat, a huge boat. People were coming over in these dinghies, and I found one dinghy that 62 refugees had been found drifting on. The engine had cut, they were all about to drown. We hung the boat above the nave of St James's over Christmas, with 3 life jackets just falling from its bowels. The boat was upside down, plunging towards the altar. And of course it represented the Holy Family's flight to Egypt, because what I witnessed in Lesbos felt biblical. And one of the things when I was working in Lesbos I had noticed, and it struck me very deeply, was the clothes. It was chaos, and there were clothes discarded everywhere, not just the life jackets that you see in the news, but actually items of clothing. And I picked some of them up, and I thought, gosh, when you pick up an item of clothing, you're immediately hit by the evocation of the presence of the wearer. And so I resolved to gather up all these clothes and again bring back thousands of items to the UK and suspend them to reflect that the wearers of those clothes were now suspended. They were stuck, they were stranded between a past to which they couldn't return and a future to which they were not being allowed to move forward. So I hung these thousands of items of clothing, which were sculpted in an animated sort of frozen explosion to reflect this fragmentation. Suspended was a cry like flight. It was a plea that this suffering cannot go on. It was a plea to recognise refugees as our other selves, to see our neighbours, perhaps across a divide that is not so great, and that instead of building walls and putting up borders, we actually reach out and extend our bridges of understanding, of compassion, of empathy. There has never been a more urgent need for empathy and compassion than these days we're living in. Well, I think children in particular are the hidden victims in all of this. Children are the hidden victims in war. And I think with this COVID-19 situation, the real hidden victims are going to be the children in the developing world in refugee camps. But of course this is what war does. War comes at everyone. War is often not held back by borders or by necessarily power in somewhere like Afghanistan. And I think there lies a great opportunity here. That when war comes to us, we realise the fragility and vulnerability of our carefully constructed lives, our lives that are so complex and interdependent. When you peel back those layers, we are revealed to be very, very vulnerable. And the Dancing Girls is one such example. We were in central Afghanistan, one of the poorest regions of an already very stricken and very poor country. And a storm was approaching. It was freezing cold right under the Hindu Kush, and I suddenly came across these girls who were in school uniform. This is a country where girls are not allowed to do anything. They're not allowed to leave their house. They're strictly forbidden by the Taliban to have any education or read or anything like that. Yet these girls were in their school uniform, and when I approached them I saw they were dancing, they were holding hands, and I was completely blown away by this. And interestingly, I saw boys when I was in Syria, when I was in Aleppo, dancing in the same way in the ruins of Aleppo. These boys told me, you can choose to hold on to your sadness or you can dance. And these girls turned to me and they said, through a translator, tell them when you go home that we are not just a country of men and bombs and guns. We are girls who like to dance. We are girls who like to wear lipstick, and we have friends. Tell them that. That's what my work is about.